So I asked Lance if he would help me with the message this morning, so I'm going to invite him up here. I asked him because of the folks here. He's known me perhaps the longest and has served on so many. He served on our launch team. He's known me professionally and as a friend. He's been my friend for a really long time. So he knows the good and the bad and the ugly about me. And we're going to talk about sin today and forgiveness. So I thought I would ask him. So I'm asking you, this is my handy dandy little backpack. There's nothing in there right now. For you to be willing to open your minds. Because today, odds are that as we talk about this sin and forgiveness, I might step on your toes. It's not intentional. I trust that you will trust me, that as we talk about these things and I say icky things, like you're not going to be like, oh, she's talking to me right now. The examples that I use are just figurative examples. I ask different people to give me their, like lies and that kind of stuff. And so first, we're going to talk about the sin that we have in our lives. Okay, so I'm just going to name some sins. So we're going to come over here. And there's different sizes of rocks. And so I told Lance he could be objective and he could put the rocks in my backpack based on the impact. We say that all sin is sin, and we're going to talk in a few minutes about the definition of sin. But Lance is going to put the stones in the backpack based on the impact of the sin. Okay? So we're going to start, and I'm just going to talk about random sins. I'm not talking to you or about you, and I'm also not doing a self-confessional. When I do a self-confessional in the second part of the message, I will be sharing personal examples of things that I hold on to because I don't ever want to point fingers. But the things I'm getting ready to list, please know that I am not saying I have done these things because I would like to be gainfully employed at the end of the message, okay? So the first one is something I've done. Yesterday morning, I needed to be somewhere. Actually, it was Friday. I needed to be somewhere at a certain time, and someone in front of me in a 45-mile-an-hour zone only went 20, all the way up Perth Road. So I was ticked off, and that's a kind word, and said not nice things about them as I drove up Perth Road. The other thing is, sometimes when people say that, I'm a different age than I am. So, example, I'm in my early 40s. It's not really anybody's business how old I am. So I can tell a little white lie and get by with that, don't you think? What about, I went to Harvard, and I graduated with my doctorate in ministry. I disagree with you on some of the impact of these sins, actually. I had different ideas, but okay, see, that'll preach as well, because the way we think our actions impact other people, they perhaps could impact them very differently. What about... I only had one beverage at the brewery, and I'm okay to drive. What'd you put in there? That's bullcrap. I didn't even feel the backpack move. Yeah, I'm going to do it myself. Isn't that the way I do most things in life? So, and what about Pornhub? There's some video. Do you know what that? Don't answer that question. Do you know what that is? Because you look very confused right now. It's just some videos of relationships. So, no, I did not do videos, nor have I watched them. But, it's okay to do that, right? It's just that. That glass from the brewery that I feel like I deserve to have because, and no, you've not done this, but I've paid this much for this beer, and they have these really cool glasses. You can just sneak it in your bag. That's not sin, right? Okay. Yeah, that's tiny. So it's okay if I just take a few things every now and then that are not mine because I'm entitled to them. Or what about that end of year test that I needed to pass to get to keep my 4.0, and my the guy that was sitting in front of me, his elbow, he just so conveniently moved it closer to his body and moved his test paper over, this is actually a true story, over to the side of the desk so I could pass geometry. That was funny. Y'all are not laughing. I mean, come on. How many of us have cheated on a test? I mean, that's not all of us. I think so, maybe. What about I'm out of town and I've had too much to drink, and I'm at the bar, and there's a guy, and he asked me if I wanted to have a drink with him, even though I'm in a committed relationship with someone, and it was just one time, and it went too far. Yeah, I'd say so. Or what about, and let's, on the taxes, like, I know I sold all that stock, but the IRS, yeah, they don't know I have that account in the stocks. And so even though I made pretty big gains, that it's my money, not the IRS's. And let's see. I don't even know the biggest one. Maybe just all the anger and just hatred I have towards people that are different than me, perhaps politically or economically or with sexual orientation or skin color. I have biases and resentment towards them that I just can't get over because they act like they are entitled to things, and I don't think that they are. Well, thank you. All right. Can you relate to any of those? I mean, it's stuff, it's real. And like, hopefully, we haven't done some of those bigger ones, but odds are we've all, taken something that wasn't ours that we felt entitled to, like a pin from a hotel. I mean, it can be small and innocuous, or it can be big. We say that in the eyes of God, sin is sin. And so I want to talk about the meaning of sin for a little while. So, like, the word in the New Testament for sin translates hamartia. It's an archery term. If you've been a part of West for any time, you've heard me talk about this for so long. Because what just happened, like this backpack, when I grew up in a church, all of those little things that I talked about, they would be like Sunday sermons, like individually. Like, we'd have a whole Sunday on adultery. We'd have a whole Sunday on theft. We'd have a whole Sunday on other things. And so that we as religious people begin to feel like it's our job to point out of other people's sin. And I hope that if we will understand the real definition of sin, we will stop trying to categorize and judge other people, because in the eyes of God, and we understand God to be love, sin is sin. Is sin. It's just sin. Now, like we talked about a few minutes ago, is there a difference in impact between me taking a pen from the Hampton Inn and Suites, those little pens that they have there on the desk? I'm not sure that those are complimentary. My taking that pen, is there a difference in impact between that and me getting drunk at a bar and having a one-night stand with some man that I do not know? Absolutely. I mean, there's a huge impact. And honestly, I wish I hadn't cheated on my geometry test, because I can't tell you now, in real life, like, you really need geometry. I mean, it matters. Whether you want it to matter or not, it matters. So there's a difference in impact. But the term sin means hamartia. It's an archery term. And if you think about archery, and you have your bow and your arrow, and you draw it back and then you let it go, where that arrow goes is anybody's guess. If you're really good at it, you're going to hit the bullseye and it's going to be right in the center. But odds are, if we're not all great people in archery, then the arrow's going to go to the right or to the left, or go too far up or too far down, and we're going to miss the mark. If you think about the mark being God's love, and God, and living at one with God, which means that in all that we think about, in all of our intentions and all of our actions, we are at one with love, then that's hitting the mark. And so when we don't hit that mark, whether it's little we think innocuous things, or what about those little white lies that we think? I really was surprised that Lance put a bigger rock in the backpack for, me lying about where I got my doctorate of ministry from, or that I got a doctorate of ministry. But as I was thinking, as we were doing that, I'm like, oh my gosh, that really does matter, because what if I lied to you about my credentials as a pastor? I mean, that could be harmful. You trust my education. You trust that I didn't just stumble in off the street one day and go, whoo, I want to be a preacher. It matters. And so when we miss the mark, and we miss the mark of being people that live out of love and out of kindness, that is sin. And we do it, and we do it a lot. Sometimes, we don't even think about it. Have you ever done this? Somebody asked you to go somewhere, and you just didn't want to go. Whether it's your friends in school or whether it's adult friends, and you just don't want to go, you just want to stay at home, but you make up a reason for not going. It's a little white lie. Have you ever heard of that? Little white lie? That's still missing the mark. That's still not living out of being a person of integrity, and we get in trouble. True story, and it called me to live out of the space that I live out of now. 20 years ago, 25, gosh, it's so long ago, years before I was in my first appointment as an associate pastor in a town, at a church in Morganton. And the pastor that had hired me, we had this amazing working relationship. And if you're new to United Methodism, we are this thing called itinerant. And whether we like it or not, periodically the pastors move. And it's hard if you're the pastor, it's hard if you're the church, it's hard if you're the church staff. And this particular time, and it happens every year, they decide as a cabinet, and I'm just giving you a little brief course on Methodism, in conjunction with the church and with the pastor, how long the pastor will stay. Will the pastor stay another year or not? It happens every year. And I'm staying another year, so that's not why I'm telling you this story. But what had happened was this pastor, whom I just respected infinitely, and he was a phenomenal preacher. I was 24 years old. I was so able to be impacted by ministry, and it's such a formative place in my life. And he came to be the pastor there, and I fell in love with ministry even more. And I'd wanted to be in ministry as a youth and a teenager. My parents told me no, and so I let that dream go. I majored in elementary ed, and then this guy moved to North Morganton, and I'm like, oh my gosh, he just makes this click and make sense. And I was so inspired under his leadership. I really felt that call to ministry again, and I decided that I was going to pursue ordained ministry. So over the time that he was there, I did the schooling and that kind of stuff to be ordained as a deacon, which is an equal order to elders. I'm an elder now, but was a deacon. You just are called to different things. So I did that work while he was there. And then, much to my dismay, around Christmas, he told me that he was going to be moving in June when preachers move. And I was like, okay. I mean, I knew about the itinerant system, so I just trusted that God was going to be at work in it. I'm telling you all the backstory because this is one of the things that I've done in my career that I'm not proud of, but I learned from it, which is another point of sin. So he moves, new pastor moves in, and my mentor, my first senior pastor, he said, I don't care what you do, do not move within a year. Don't go find a new job within a year. The church needs stability and consistency and continuity. So do not move. And so it was the longest year of my life. When the gentleman that moved in to be the new senior pastor was there, apparently his wife had done the job that I was doing. I was their part-time director of Christian education. I had a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old by this point, and she had done this job before. And they were marketably more conservative than I was, and this was 30 years ago, so you can imagine how different we are now. In fact, he's one of the ones that left our denomination and went to the new denomination. So that gives you an idea of the differences that we had. And so when I did things with the kids in kids ministry, like watch TV, they didn't watch TV. They didn't own a TV. Little things like that. It was like oil and water for a really long time. Now, I was young and not very wise and did not have the life experience that I have now. So I did some things that I'm not proud of, like get angry at things I shouldn't have gotten angry about. And then, or if I'd gotten angry about going to him instead of going home and talking about it or just holding it inside. Because I don't know if you know this or not, but like, over that year, the stuff that just started to eat at me got really heavy. Just like this backpack right now is getting actually very heavy, and I'm perspiring because it's a lot. But sometimes the things that we do are a lot, and sometimes the things that we carry are a lot. So anyway, long story short, after a year, there's this committee in a different structured Methodist church called the Staff Parish Relations Committee. And one of the ladies on that came to me to see how I was doing. And I told her the truth. I told her that they were constantly calling me in to tell me they didn't like how I did ministry, and that they had suggested that, either I let her do it or I find other ways of fulfilling my calling, and that I felt like I was being bullied out of a job and all these things. I just told her the truth. But I didn't necessarily do it in kindness. And a few weeks later, I got a phone call from my boss. And he said, I understand you had a conversation with so-and-so. And I understand you told her A, B, C, and D. Now, the good news is the things that I told her were true. And in the structure of the United Methodist Church, if you cannot talk to your senior pastor and get results, then you can go to the staff parish. So I was sort of right in what I did, but not totally. Because I never sat both of them down at the same time and said, look, I feel ganged up on. I feel like you're trying for my job. I feel like all those things. And so he lost complete trust and faith in me. Now, the good news is, like, for my career, I'd already applied for another job just that happened to fall open, and I got it. And so this was literally my last week of employment there. But guess what? I mean, we left on such bad terms because of the stuff that I had said and the anger that I had carried in my heart, the sin that I had done. And I mean, I was no like Mother Teresa. I was mean. I was a bully. And that was not good. And carrying those actions around for that year, it was heavy. Now, after I moved and grew up a little, there came a time in ministry where we ran into each other at annual conference. And I said, look, I am so sorry for what I did and how I blindsided you and blindsided your wife. And I had reached out to her to apologize before this, and he apologized too. And we ended up being friends. I did some consulting with him after that was over. He was enthralled with the way that we did church as West. But carrying all that stuff around, I mean, the stuff that I did wrong, I mean, it was heavy. Our sin is heavy. It's interesting that in the Lord's Prayer, Jesus says, forgive us of our trespasses or our transgressions or our debts. I mean, he throws that out there. It's a prayer to God. Forgive us of our trespasses, our debts, as we forgive those who trespass or transgress or debt against us. So it's a dual thing. First, we get forgiveness from God for all the stuff that we do. And so guess what? And actually I did plan for that to happen, just not out of the backpack. I wanted to drop the backpack because listen, you hear how heavy that is? The stuff that we do in our lives that are not acts of love, that's their heaviness. And it may not be heaviness like that we are aware of, but that's what sin does to us. It weighs us down. We're going to sin, like John Wesley, the founding father of Methodism, wrote a sermon on sin. And he talks about in this message, like how even though we try really hard not to sin because of our human nature, we're going to sin. I mean, the Apostle Paul talked about that. He said, I don't want to, but I'd end up doing it anyway. And then if I'm even thinking about it, is that a sin? I mean, sin is a big deal. But if we try our best to live as people of love and people of light, then we won't be carrying around this stuff that is just so heavy. This morning before worship, I needed to go get the big rocks, and I didn't want to buy them. And we had some down near the water, so I took my little backpack and I walked down to pick them up. Now, we have like a lot of steps that lead down the yard, and normally, even on a good day, I'm huffing by the time I get back. Today, it was a bad day, and I had already put on jeans for work. I mean, that was the stupidest thing that I could have done. It was heavy carrying this stuff around. Sin is missing the mark. So I want you to think about for just a few seconds in your life, what is it that you do that's missing the mark? I mean, when we get angry at things we shouldn't get angry at, when we judge other people based on some criteria, when we judge at all, that is a sin. When we mistreat our bodies, that is a sin. When we do all these things that are not in acts of love for our environment, those are sins. I mean, like anything that we do that's not an act of love, it is missing the mark. But the beautiful thing is, like, we get to drop it. And we get to let it go. We get to let it all go. Because Jesus said, pray, forgive me of my sin. And we read throughout scriptures, like in the Psalms, God forgives us of our sin as far as the east is to the west. And we understand that there's no way of defining that. That's how big and vast God's love is. So there is nothing, not even an affair, that is unforgivable with God. So feel that. Hold that. So many times in ministry, I have people that come and they want to talk to me about how they don't feel worthy because they've made mistakes and they've done wrong things. Now listen, I mean, sometimes there are consequences to our actions. I feel rather confident that if I were to come home and say, hey, Tom, I had a few too many lemon drop martinis at the bar in Aruba, and I met this guy, and I'm really sorry. I'm not thinking we'll then sit down to a candlelight dinner, and he'll be like, it's okay, Andrea. Anything you do is fine with me. I mean, there are consequences to our actions. But the beautiful thing is, like, when we learn that God forgives us of all things, part of it is confessing those things and saying, you know what, I messed up. And God, I'm so sorry. That when we have that humility and that acknowledgement of the stuff that we're carrying around, we get to let it go. Especially if we are willing to forgive ourselves. So this morning, in that part, I want you to recognize, like, there's nothing nothing that you can do and have that will get in the way of you and God's love. Nothing. There is no sin that is too big. There is a flip side to the sin. And this is what I want to leave you with. I'm going to empty my backpack again. And this one's a little more personal, so I'm just going to hook it on the front and not ask Lance to put it in there because I'm going to tell you my own stuff. Like the people that bullied me when I was in middle school, there was a lot. That really hurt me. So much so that I still remember. So I carry that around. The woman that betrayed my confidence and went to the senior pastor and his wife and told them everything, literally, that I said. That was not okay. Or one time, long time ago, after an employee left, we had to look in their email for some things. And I saw the emails that they sent about me. They called me Your Highness. I'm a lot of things. I drive for perfection and I give a lot of grace, but I do not act like a queen. I clean the commodes in the office. So I felt like that was very unfair. And I'm still angry about that. Or perhaps it was the clergy person friend that was a little jealous of the success of West. And he said, "So, how are you ever going to stay successful when this bishop retires, since you've got him in your back pocket? How will you ever continue to be successful?" And you know what? Like, there's been just some other people in my life that have hurt me, said nasty things about me, and they stuck. And as much as I would like to not carry that, I still do. And I know that I've not forgiven them because, like, I still think about it. This is equally as heavy. This is what happens when we hold on to the things that are done to us by other people. This is what happens when we hold on to other people's sin. Through hurt and betrayal and the pain that comes from that and the lack of ability to trust other people. I mean, when stuff happens to us, it adds up. And I can assure you, it was a lot easier to carry the stuff on my back than to hold it with my arms. I want to show you the Greek word for trespasses. That's the first translation of the Lord's Prayer that we have. The word, it's peripetomata. That's the Greek word for trespasses. And if you look in the translations, they all have different words. Debts, forgive us of our debts as we forgive those who have a debt against us. Forgive us of our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Forgive us of our transgressions as we forgive those who trespass against us. All of those words mean moral failure. And then the word forgive means let it go. And I'm not going to drop the backpack because the odds of the rocks hitting me on my toes that are exposed are good. But I am going to let it down. And that's what happens when we recognize that we are a forgiven people. And just as far as the sun rises and our vast expanse goes from the east to the west, we are forgiven if we'll let go of the pain and the betrayal and the just meanness and bullying and the judgmental nature of humanity. If we'll let go of it, we're so much better off. So the next question is to how. Confessing it, confessing the things that we do wrong, and then confessing the other things that people have done to us. If that doesn't work, and just confessing it to God, therapy, I'm not being funny, I'm an advocate for cognitive behavioral therapy, having someone else to help you process things. It matters sometimes. Find a trusted friend. But the main thing is, even when things have happened to us that are so egregious, and they cut to the depth of our core, there's one thing we can remember. A guy who did nothing wrong to anybody, who just loved people and ticked off other people by loving people. They killed him. And they didn't just kill him quickly, like they arrested him while he was praying. They beat him all night long. And then they hung him up on a cross, and it took hours for him to suffocate and die. But as he was there suffocating and dying, he said, Father, Abba, Daddy, forgive them. They just don't know what they do. And that's what we can assume as well. People just don't know what they do. And when we will approach situations and recognize that everybody acts out of their own stuff, and 99.999% of the time, it's not about us, it's about them, then we can cling to that word forgive and let it go. And in letting it go, we find our freedom of being loved and being made whole. Let us pray. Gracious God, you have forgiven us of much, whether it's annoyances with other people or our judgmental nature or just the deep stuff, God, that we've done. You forgive us. And God, sometimes it's hard for us to forgive others because of the pain and the woundedness that we carry. Childhood stuff. But there's nothing good that comes with holding on to pain. And on the other side of that pain is freedom and redemption and grace. So God, help us let it go so that we're not carrying around that stuff that just weighs us down. And thank you for being the ultimate example of what it means to forgive. We are so grateful. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. So if you're online right now, I invite you for the next 10 minutes to check out our Sign Up Genius for Amped Camp. It's your way of giving back as these folks, I hope you'll go help us pick up some trash in the parking lot. Thank you for being here this morning, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks.